The endless ribbon of asphalt stretched out before me, shimmering in the heat even as night fell. I'd been driving for what felt like days, the monotony of the Nevada desert broken only by the occasional withered shrub or sun-bleached animal bones. They don't call Highway 50 the loneliest road in America for nothing. My eyes were gritty with fatigue, and I could feel the beginnings of a caffeine headache throbbing behind my temples. But I had a schedule to keep. The load of electronics in my trailer needed to be in Sacramento by morning, come hell or high water. Just a few more hours, I told myself. You can make it, old man. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a mirage, a trick of the fading light on the dusty air. But as I drew closer, the figure solidified into a young woman, thumbs stuck out hopefully. Now, I'm not usually one for picking up hitchhikers. 25 years on the road teaches you to be cautious. But something about her made me ease off the accelerator. Maybe it was the desperation in her stance, or the way she seemed to sway slightly in the hot wind. Whatever it was, before I knew it, I was pulling onto the shoulder in a cloud of dust. She hurried over as I cranked down the passenger window, her face a mix of relief and weariness. Oh, thank God, she breathed. I thought I was going to die out here. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd first thought, probably early 20s. Pretty, in a fragile sort of way, with big green eyes and a smattering of freckles across her nose. But there was something off about her, a tension in the way she held herself. "Where you headed?" I asked, already knowing I was going to give her a ride regardless. "West," she said quickly. "As far west as you're going." I nodded, jerking my thumb toward the passenger door. "Hop in. I'm on my way to Sacramento." Relief flooded her face as she clambered up into the cab. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." As we pulled back onto the highway, I snuck another glance at my unexpected passenger. She was huddled against the door, arms wrapped tightly around herself despite the warmth of the evening. "I'm Bill," I offered, trying to break the awkward silence. She hesitated a moment before responding. "Sarah." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Mind if I ask what you're running from?" Her head snapped around, eyes wide with alarm. "What makes you think I'm running from something?" I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the road. "Young girl like you, out here in the middle of nowhere, usually means you're running to something, or from something, and you don't look like someone chasing a dream." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." I barked out a laugh. "Try me, sweetheart. I've seen some strange things in my time on the road." She didn't respond, and I let the silence stretch out between us. The miles rolled by, marked only by the steady thrum of tires on asphalt and the occasional flicker of my headlights catching a reflective road sign. It was full dark now, the vast emptiness of the desert night pressing in around us. The moon hung low and bloated on the horizon, bathing everything in a sickly silver light. Sarah stirred beside me, a soft gasp escaping her lips. I glanced over to see her pressing herself even harder against the door, eyes squeezed shut. "You okay there?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice despite myself. "Pull over," she said through gritted teeth. "You need to let me out. Now." I frowned, easing off the gas. "What's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" "Please," she begged, real fear in her voice now. "You don't understand. I can feel it coming. You need to get away from me." A chill ran down my spine at her words. Get away from her? What the hell did that mean? Before I could respond, Sarah let out a strangled cry that turned into a wet, gurgling sound. I watched in horror as her body began to contort, bones shifting and popping beneath her skin like writhing snakes. "Oh Jesus," I breathed, stomping on the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt on the empty highway, and I scrambled to unbuckle my seatbelt. But it was too late. Sarah's face seemed to melt, her features twisting and reshaping with sickening cracks. Her jaw dislocated with an audible pop, elongating into a canine muzzle as teeth pushed through bleeding gums, lengthening into savage fangs. Her eyes bulged, then sank back into her skull, changing color from green to a sickly yellow. Horse fur erupted from her pores like thousands of writhing worms, quickly spreading across her body as her clothes shredded. I could see her ribcage expanding, muscles rippling and reforming under her skin. Her fingers twisted grotesquely, nails peeling back as deadly claws burst forth, dripping with blood and viscera. The sound was almost worse than the sight. Wet, meaty noises punctuated by the snap and crackle of realigning bones. A series of pops ran down her spine as it elongated, forcing her into a hunched posture. In a matter of agonizing seconds, the young woman was gone, replaced by a nightmarish fusion of human and wolf. The creature that had been Sarah turned to face me, lips pulled back in a snarl that was equal parts rage and anguish, strings of saliva hanging from its newly formed muzzle. I fumbled for the door handle, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. But my trembling fingers couldn't seem to work the latch. The werewolf lunged, its hot breath washing over me as razor-sharp teeth snapped inches from my face. I threw up an arm in desperate defense, crying out as fangs sank deep into flesh. I felt tendons snap and bone crunch as it shook its head violently, tearing into my forearm. Somehow I managed to wrench the door open with my good arm, tumbling out onto the asphalt. Blood poured from my mangled limb as I scrambled to my feet and ran, not daring to look back. The sound of tearing metal and shattering glass filled the air as the creature tore its way out of the cab. I made it maybe 50 yards before a weight slammed into my back, driving me to the ground. Claws raked across my shoulders, shredding skin and muscle like wet paper. I screamed as I felt my shoulder blade crack under the pressure. The creature flipped me onto my back, and I found myself staring up into glowing yellow eyes and a maw full of teeth, strings of my own flesh still hanging from them. This is it, I thought. This is how Bill Hawkins dies. Torn apart by something that shouldn't exist on a godforsaken stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. Deputy Sheriff Mark Callahan squinted through the windshield of his patrol car, trying to pierce the thickening mist that clung to the lonely stretch of Montana highway. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and angry reds. And bloated harvest moon hung low, seeming to leer at him through the bare branches of the roadside trees. The radio crackled to life, startling him. "Dispatch to Unit 17. Come in, Unit 17. Mark sighed, reaching for the handset. "This is Unit 17. Go ahead, dispatch. We've got a 10 to 91 reported on Highway 287, about 10 miles north of your position. Possible wild animal attack on a vehicle. Can you respond?" As he flipped on his lights and accelerated down the empty road, Mark couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something about this night felt wrong. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more oppressive. He shook his head, trying to clear away the cobwebs of paranoia. It was just another call. Probably a deer strike or maybe a bear if they were unlucky. Nothing he hadn't handled 100 times before. But as he rounded a bend and his headlights illuminated the scene ahead, Mark knew this was something different, something terrible. A car lay on its side in the ditch, metal twisted and shredded, as if it had been mauled by some enormous beast. The windows were smashed out, glass glittering in the grass like fallen stars, and everywhere there was blood. Mark pulled to a stop, hand instinctively going to the butt of his service pistol as he stepped out of the cruiser. The coppery scent of blood hung thick in the air, mixed with something else, a musky, animal odor that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Hello?" he called out, sweeping his flashlight across the wreckage. "This is the sheriff's department. Is anyone there?" Only silence answered him. Swallowing hard, Mark approached the vehicle. As he drew closer, he could make out deep gouges in the metal, claw marks from some impossibly large animal. His beam fell on a bloody handprint smeared across the crumpled hood, and he felt his stomach lurch. That's when he saw the drag marks. A wide swath of crushed grass and disturbed earth led away from the car and into the trees that lined the highway. And there, half hidden in shadow, Mark caught a glimpse of something pale. Heart pounding, he moved closer. It was a human arm, torn raggedly at the shoulder, fingers curled as if still grasping for help. "Jesus Christ," Mark breathed, fumbling for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. We've got a confirmed 10 to 91 with at least one fatality. I'm going to need backup and..." A low, rumbling growl cut through the night air, freezing the words in his throat. Slowly, Mark turned, raising his flashlight with a trembling hand. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a monster straight out of his darkest nightmares. It was vaguely wolf-like in shape, but far larger than any wolf had a right to be. Matted gray fur covered its massive frame, muscles rippling beneath as it took a step forward. Its muzzle was pulled back in a snarl, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. But it was the eyes that truly terrified Mark, glowing amber orbs filled with a cold, alien intelligence. For a moment that stretched into eternity, man and beast stared at each other. Then, with a bone-chilling howl, the creature charged. Mark's training took over. He drew his weapon and fired, the gunshots shattering the night's silence. The bullets struck home, tearing chunks of flesh and fur from the advancing monster, but it barely seemed to notice, not even breaking stride. Panic overrode everything else. Mark turned and ran, sprinting for the relative safety of his patrol car. He could hear the thing behind him, massive paws pounding the earth, hot breath on the back of his neck. He dove into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut, just as the werewolf crashed into the side of the vehicle. The impact rocked the car, metal screaming as claws raked across it. Mark fumbled with the keys, engine roaring to life. But before he could shift into gear, a massive paw smashed through the driver's side window in a shower of glass. He screamed as claws raked across his face and chest, blood spraying across the interior. The werewolf's muzzle forced its way through the shattered window, snapping and snarling as it tried to reach him. In desperation, Mark emptied his clip into the creature's face at point-blank range. It reeled back with a pained yelp, giving him a moment's respite. Gasping and bleeding, Mark reached for the radio. "Officer down. Officer down. There's some kind of animal. It's..." The roof of the car peeled back like the lid of a sardine can, moonlight flooding the interior. Mark looked up in horror to see the werewolf looming over him, blood matting its fur, one eye a ruined mess from his gunshots. But the other eye gleamed with savage hunger as it reached for him with claws like butcher knives. Mark Callahan's scream echoed across the empty highway, cut brutally short. By the time backup arrived an hour later, there was little left of the deputy beyond scraps of a shredded uniform and a badge bent almost beyond recognition. And somewhere in the deep woods of Montana, a werewolf nursed its wounds and waited for its next victim.